Russell, hi and welcome to studio.
Thank you, it's good to be here.
Last couple of weeks have seen dramatic events in Europe, specifically around Greece. Most people don't quite understand how we got here. If you could take us through how we got to this position.
Look, the Greek situation is in essence very simple. If you spend more than you earn for a very long period of time, you're going to get into trouble, you're going to experience forced austerity. Well, what we've seen in Greece is really just millions of people, including the government, living beyond their means, and the aggregated effect of that is a nation that is now being forced to now live within those means. So the essence of the problem is fairly simple. Of course, the complexities come around currency systems, the politics of the problem. Are you going to be in or out of the euro? Those, I think, are the layers of complexities over a very simple problem, which is too much debt, reckless spending, a government that I think grew far too big, far too quickly, and is now realizing that it doesn't have the resources to keep doing what it thought it wanted to do, and it's now having to pull back in. So I guess the essence of it is austerity is less of a choice than it is a consequence.
Of course. A lot of commentators cite the fact that Greece is gave birth to democracy, and we're seeing that in play again. It's raising the issue of what say can citizens have in how economy is handled. We just saw recently the referendum on whether to go with austerity measures or not. What do you think the implications are for democracy on a broader scale?
Well, I think I have mixed feelings about it, because on the one hand, yes, the question was sort of turned over to the population, and the consensus feeling was that the population spoke resoundingly in favor of renegotiating the deal. Of course, in reality, only 65% of voters actually showed up. So, 35% of people were apathetic enough to stay at home, and the no vote still got 40%. So it's hard to say that Greece has resoundingly voted in a particular direction. Having said that, I think the refreshing thing to see is that they turned it over to a democratic choice. But I think more importantly than that is how the Greek negotiators from Syriza took a stance that was counter to the establishment, to the European Union, to the IMF, and I think showed that perhaps more importantly the importance of national sovereignty in the context of a broader European Union that is trying to take sovereignty away to Brussels, that is trying to centralize a lot of these functions. I think what the Greeks said, hey, let's try and get a little bit of decentralization again and restore some balance between Brussels and Athens.
The big question really at the moment is whether Greece will stay in the Eurozone and will still continue with using the euro as a currency. What's your take on that?
Well, look, I know what most people want that are close to the situation. The core European institutions don't want to let Greece go, because it sends a signal of weakness that their union is not an outright failure, but at least hasn't worked out very well for some of its members. They want to create the sense that they're a club of countries for whom it's very good to be a part of this club. And Greek people, democratically, and this is why the vote was not about whether to be in or out of the Eurozone, it was something else, overwhelmingly want to be part of the Eurozone. So the Greeks want to be part of the Eurozone. The Europeans, by and large, want Greece to be part of the Eurozone. It's hard to see Greece leaving, to be perfectly honest. I think it would be a real significant breakdown of negotiations if that would have to force Greece out of the Eurozone. Most parties, I think, at this stage want Greece in the Eurozone.
You started off by pointing out to the genesis of the problem being that the country was spending more than it was generating an income. If we look at some other European countries, what's commonly known as the pigs, Portugal, Italy, and some other countries, will what's happening in Greece have implications on those countries also defaulting and also having a referendum?
It's a great question. I think the immediate implication is what people are calling political contagion. So when we talk about contagion, we often talk about it in a financial sense. That banking system collapses, so it impacts other banking systems, and there's financial contagion. But what Greece, I think, has kicked off is some kind of political contagion, emboldening people, political parties in places like Portugal, Spain, Italy, France even, and in fact all across Europe to say, well, hang on, you can actually stand up to these institutions. You can actually negotiate a better deal. You can exert more sovereignty on the situation. And also to say, there is potentially an easier way out of their debt problem. Maybe there's even, room for these countries to default more on their debt, or for bond investors to take bigger haircuts on those debts. So a can of worms has certainly been opened politically, and I think we're going to see that spreading across Europe. Core Europe and the European institutions, I think their job is going to be to try and contain that, to try and calm everyone down and say, look, we're in a good club here, and we've got some teething problems. We're only about 15 years old, and we need to just work through this. That's going to be the message from core Europe. But political contagion is definitely the thing to watch going forward.
On an economic side, one of the stories that's not really told as much, given what's happening in Europe, is Iceland, who withdrew their application to the EU, and subsequent to that, following the banking crisis, have actually managed to turn the economy around.
Well, look, they did. It certainly didn't make them immune from crisis, by no means. And I think the context here is that Iceland sank into a deep depression. Its economy utterly collapsed, and its banks basically failed. But yes, I think the ability to manage your affairs as an independent state, where you don't have to concede on every point to 15 other countries, and kind of work through this grand compromise when you're trying to deal with your own specific problems, has been a great benefit to Iceland. And I think the other thing to say, of course, is that Iceland is a tiny country, and we, research does show, and some of the work we've done shows that smaller countries through this crisis period have been a lot more nimble and a lot more able to reform positively than some of your bigger countries that are saddled with not only huge geopolitical considerations, but big banking systems and kind of very large problems. So Iceland probably lucky that it's in and of itself a small country, but certainly being a sovereign state that could really make its own decisions right from the get-go of that crisis, we've seen the huge value in that.
If we bring it back home to Africa, there's been moves afoot for more integration on a regional and also on a broader continental scale. What are some of the lessons that Africa can maybe take away from the experience of EU?
Great question. I think big lesson is you don't have to integrate your monetary system to have cooperation economically. So I think one of the big constraints that face a lot of countries in Europe is that they are bound in a monetary union, and what that's started to do is bind them in a fiscal union, and they're starting to have to cede fiscal sovereignty to Brussels. And that, in a way, is what we've seen in Greece, is a pushback against that. So I think Africa just needs to realize that, it can open its borders, it can allow freer trade amongst countries, freer movement of people, more financial integration, more integration within banking systems, and that doesn't have to mean a monetary union. So talk of a monetary union in Africa is unnecessary. Africa just needs to realize that if it trades more with itself and within itself, it'll be really great for the continent. So more regional integration, freedom of movement, bigger and better connectivity between African countries. That's the key for African integration.
Russell, thanks so much for your views.
Thank you.